Okay, now I've skipped to page 276 in the handouts. Now we are going to look at adjective clause pronouns used as the object of a verb. We have just gone over examples where the subject of the adjective clause is the subject, basically. And now we're going to look at adjective clauses that are objects of the verbs. Okay, so let's look at the example here. Again, we are looking at two sentences. The man was Mr. Jones. I saw him, him being Mr. Jones. It's the same person. So remember, I said, if you have the same noun in the two sentences that you're trying to combine, then instead of saying him or Mr. Jones, you would just use one of the relative pronouns that signals to your reader or listener, I'm a complete sentence, but I'm going to embed myself into another sentence. Therefore, it becomes dependent on the main clause. Now let's look at the pronouns that we can use when we're looking at adjective clauses that are objects of verbs. Let's take a look here. The man who I saw, or whom I saw, if you want to be very grammatical and you want to sound like British English, you would add the M. This is most proper. That M means I'm the object. That's what that stands for right there. But in American speech, we often don't say whom. That's kind of disappearing in American English. It is seen as extremely formal, and we use it a lot more in writing, but even in writing, we have writers that tend not to use it. But if you want to impress your English teacher, then you can say whom for those who are being used as the object of the verb. So you can see that the relative pronoun is the object of the verb because you find out what noun you're going to replace, as in this case it's him, and where's your verb? Your verb is right here. So this noun is coming after the verb. So when it comes after the verb, we call it an object, the object of the verb. So what did you see? I saw him. That's the object of what you saw. So now we're going to choose pronouns that work as object pronouns. And this is object relative pronouns, which adjective clauses use. So we can use who or whom. We also have another choice, more informal, but we could say the man that I saw was Mr. Jones. Now here's something that only happens in object adjective clauses. And that's the option to not even put the pronoun. We can use it optionally. In other words, we can delete it out of the sentence and it still is grammatical. This is only an object. You can't do that in a subject adjective clause because every sentence needs a subject. So if you deleted the relative pronoun, it would no longer have a subject. I'll explain that to you a little bit more in detail as we go along further. So it's okay if you say the man who I saw, or the man whom I saw was Mr. Jones, or the man that I saw was Mr. Jones, or the man I saw was Mr. Jones. Notice that this is optional. So I'll put a little parenthesis around that. That means that it can be there or it doesn't have to be there. So that's the parentheses that we'll use. So let me give you an example of the subject adjective clause like we just learned. For example, the book is on the table, and if I wanted to say the book is mine or it is mine, these two mean the same. Notice again that we are sharing the same noun when we do this, and that noun is the book. So we can share that and use a relative pronoun. So I have the book here, right here, and I have the book here. So instead of saying the book twice, I am just going to use a relative pronoun, and since it's a thing, I can't use who or whom. I can say that, okay? Or I can say which is on the table is fine as well. Notice that this is a subject adjective clause. Right here is a subject adjective clause that is on the table. How do I know it's a subject adjective clause? Because where is the book? The book is before the verb. So If in the adjective clause, the noun that you are replacing with the relative pronoun comes before the verb, it is an adjective clause. Subject, okay? Subject adjective clause. But if whatever you're talking about comes after the verb, I saw, okay, the man, or I saw him, or I saw Mr. Jones, if it comes after that verb, now we have an object adjective clause. If it comes before, we have right here. If it becomes before the verb, which is here, is, and this represents the book, right? The book on the table. So the book that is on the table is mine. The book is mine is the main clause. And that is on the table is the adjective clause. Why is this important? It's important for this reason. It means that anytime you want to use this zero, which just means deleted, it just means it's not present, but it could be, you can only do that with subject, only do that with object adjective clauses. So if we look at this example, the book that is on the table is mine, we know that this is a subject adjective clause for this reason. Let's take a look at the relative pronoun. Our relative pronoun is that. What comes right next to the relative pronoun? I'm just going to mark this as RP. That's a relative pronoun. Right next to that is the verb is. So that's a verb. Okay? So if you have a relative pronoun plus a verb, that equals a subject adjective clause. And that means that equals cannot delete the relative pronoun. Very important for you to know this, okay? Because in English, if you want to write a subject adjective clause, and that means that you have the relative pronoun acting as the subject right there, and we know it's acting as a subject because a verb follows immediately, then we know that's subject. Right now, in this lesson, we're talking about object, but I'm comparing the two. So let's take a look at this. What happens if we try to delete the word that? What happens if we try to do that? Okay, so let's take that out and just show you. If we could delete that, it would say the book is on the table is mine. The book is on the table is mine. Well, is it the table that is yours or is the book that is yours? See, without that subject, we don't know if it is the book that is yours or if it's the table that is yours. So we have to have that relative pronoun there to tell the listener or the reader what the subject noun is. Okay, now we can also say the book, which is on the table, is mine. But we can't say the book who is on the table is mine, right? So we'll keep which here. So just remember that. If it's a subject adjective clause, we don't delete it. And it tells you right here some other things that we have to delete. And let's go back to object adjective clauses, what we have been working on. And here is another formula for you to use. How do we know if an adjective clause is an object adjective clause where we can get rid of our relative pronoun if we choose to? Well, here's the secret, and I'll tell you. If you have your relative pronoun, and in this case it's who, that, who or that, so I'm going to put the relative pronoun right there, okay? So if we have a relative pronoun, and what comes right after that relative pronoun is another pronoun or it's a noun, then what we have is we have object relative pronoun or object relative clause. So if we have relative pronoun plus either a noun or a pronoun, then the verb, So notice that a noun or a pronoun comes between the relative pronoun and the verb. This equals object, adjective clause. And that equals can delete, relative pronoun. Okay? So put this in your notes because it is one of the easiest things to really help you. Notice, do I have a subject adjective clause or an object? And therefore, in object relative clauses, we can get rid of the relative pronoun. And why can we do that? Let me move this out of the way a little for you. Why can we do that? We can do that because we still have a subject in the adjective clause. See that? The man was Mr. Jones. I saw Mr. Jones. See that? We still have a subject for the clause, and therefore we know of whom you're speaking. The man was Mr. Jones. I saw was Mr. Jones. So the man was Mr. Jones. I saw. The man basically is what it's saying. That man I saw. Okay? Or we can say the man I saw was Mr. Jones, because we have this subject I to tell us who is the subject of that adjective clause. But it's working as this pronoun. It's very important to remember this pronoun right here is in the object position. It comes after the verb. Okay? So this comes after the verb. And that's what makes it really important. So let's come down here for a couple of more notes that I wanted to show you. It tells you what's incorrect. So in object relative clauses, and we know it's object because we have a relative pronoun, right? Your RP. Right there, whom. And then you have a noun or pronoun, and then you have the verb. And that's how we know that that is an object. But notice, once we put whom or that or which, you can't put a pronoun, and I'm not talking about relative pronouns, you can't put a pronoun because you've already put that or whom, or you deleted it. You can't say, the man I saw him was Mr. Jones, or the man whom I saw him was Mr. Jones. Get rid of that pronoun that represents that man because you've already put a pronoun in here, whom or that, or we wouldn't say which because it is a man. Right. So you can see that it doesn't sound correct if we do that. So I'll get rid of my notes here so you can see that a little bit more clearly. And this is one of the most common mistakes ESL students make, is that they put the relative pronoun here as the object, and then they put the object pronoun back in, and that's what you don't want to do.